Welcome to the Narrator Roundtable. I'm André Santana, and girl, I'm ready to talk about the 3 F's of audiobooks: fear, frenzy, and for the love of God, am I going to do another 25-hour home-recorded historical fiction in dialect well below my rate? Joining me today, we have Gail. Hello.
Hello.
We got Deanna. And we got Kirt.
Hi.
Gang, this episode is going to be so juicy. I'm feeling it in my bones. So, it's spring 2022. No, wait, it's summer 2023. Or no, it's winter 2024. And I feel like I'm in another frenzy. It feels like every waking moment is dedicated to recording audiobooks. Like my personal time and my personal life are just flying out the window as I try to bring my best self to telling all these stories. And simultaneously, like looking a month ahead, I feel like I have almost nothing on my calendar after this. I've been so swamped that I've not done anywhere near enough outreaches, and I'm straddling this line of both wondering if I'm going to make it through all the work that I have, and wondering if I'm ever going to work again. I think a lot of narrators have some version of this story. You've been working for years, and suddenly your longest-standing clients aren't sending you work. Or you're buried in jobs, but it feels like you're struggling to make ends meet. Or you've spent the past year doing reach-outs, and projects show up, but it doesn't feel like anything has come in consistently enough for you to say that your career has really begun. There's a million reasons for this. I'm personally navigating my most challenging journey yet through severe symptoms of ADHD. I've also been in the same place as others where you have a full-time job outside of audiobooks that makes it feel impossible to be the right voice at the right time for all the projects. Maybe you have kids. Maybe the industry is changing. Whatever it is, we're all working on managing our time, managing our portfolios, and being companies of one as we negotiate through our projects. As all of this happened, I saw a face in the crowd who was moving through the audiobook world with a wrath and still navigating all of these things for herself. And so today's guest is the wonderful Helen Laser. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you. Wrath really got me good. That's fun.
Because it was my favorite performance of last year, I have to mention that you likely know Helen Laser as the narrator of the Reese's Book Club Earphone Award-winning, Audie-nominated Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. But come on, Helen is a 6-time Earphone Award winner, 2-time Audie finalist. So many performances to be obsessed with. She plays 4 instruments and sings. She's a joy in the everyday, and I'm so glad to have Helen joining us today on the Narrator Roundtable.
God dang, what a freaking intro. My God. Oh, I was trying to hide behind my pop filter. I was like, oh, what the? That was sweet. Thank you. Gotta wipe my tear. Put it over there. Hi, everybody. What's up?
Before we start, if you know me, you know I love to talk about rates. I love to help people understand SAG-AFTRA contracts and assess projects, and I think these are conversations we should be having. In this episode, I've asked our hosts to refrain from naming specific rates for 3 reasons. 1, we are all in different places and spaces and working with different companies, and rates don't flatly translate across all audiobook jobs. 2, SAG-AFTRA contracts with companies represent different rate ranges, and it's to the benefit of the union negotiation for companies to not know each other's terms. 3, we think this conversation should be timeless, and fingers crossed, as rates increase over time, we don't want to cement this discussion in rates that only represent a specific year. The one thing I'll note is that paymasters like Skywire are a great metric for where SAG-AFTRA kind of has a baseline rate. And different contracts might be higher or lower than a paymaster's, and as we'll discuss, the rate isn't the only important context in taking on a project, but I think paymaster rates kind of help us keep an eye on where the middle of the pack is. With that being said, step into your power, know your worth, understand your contracts, understand ranges, focus in on your needs, charge your worth, and empower fellow narrators. We love to see it. So let's dive into this conversation. And I've been alluding to, sound effects in this episode. So part 1, the drought. dun dun dun, ominous music, the piano plays cascading in the background. So like droughts, y'all, do I even have to pose a question for this part? Like, what are the vibes in the room right off the bat?
We've all been thirsty.
Let me take a sip.
Let's all have a sip.
Amen.
No.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Like, what does it actually mean for y'all when you feel like you're not getting books on your schedule? I guess I'll throw some context for like my reflection. When I remember last year after the Audis, I got my nomination, and it took about a month before anybody sent me a project. And I think, we talked a little bit about this with Deep D too, but it was like, oh, isn't this supposed to like generate work? Like, isn't this supposed to mean something? And if the reach outs aren't like solid and happening, which for me, they're not always solid and happening, it's hard to say. But I would later have conversations and learn that like, sure, people had like submitted samples to authors. People had like put me up for an audition, whatever it had been. Like I was part of the conversation, but the projects weren't coming in at that time. But it still feels like I'm still like, oh my God, am I ever going to work again?
I had a moment like that, maybe almost exactly a year-ish ago, maybe more than that. But anyway, I was talking to a fellow narrator, Rob Brinkman, total sweetie pie, and we were having lunch and chatting, and we were kind of talking about the industry and having like a, basically a therapy session together, and it was really great. And he was saying how he was booked like months and months and months in advance. And I was not, and I had never been at that point. I'd maybe had something like, oh, I know what I'm doing next month, but to be like, whatever month it was, maybe it was January, and he was like, yeah, I've got stuff all the way through like May or something like that. And I was like, oh man. And I felt a moment of like, oh my God, like I would love, like what I wouldn't give to know what my year would look like in that way. And to have that stability. And I just had dinner with him last night, and we caught up for the first time in a really long time. And we had kind of like our part 2. And I was like, Rob, like, I'm doing it now. Like, I'm making the dream come true. Like I've really like changed so much about how I go about marketing myself and creating relationships that feel really meaningful and that aren't just like, hello, here is a template email that I've not changed at all, and I've just changed your name, like making really warm and beautiful connections with people and all of this stuff and being better about it and not neglecting it or thinking, oh, they don't want to hear from me. Like I'm just who cares about what I have to say. And it was this kind of lovely moment of like, wow, like I set a goal and I'm doing it. What a cool thing. It was this very lovely full circle thing, but it comes and it goes. So like as of yesterday, I was like, oh yeah, I'm cruising. But like, who knows what's going to happen? You never know what's going to happen around the corner. And that's probably one of the harder things, because you're just like, I don't know. As of right now, I'm booked and blessed and chilling and I'm feeling great, but anything could happen at any time. And that's always just hanging over your head.
So on behalf of the Rob Brinkmans everywhere, I don't know Rob. Hi, Rob. I will be the white guy entering the chat. And I will say that this phenomenon is something that I did not experience until like 2 months ago. Like February and March of this year were the first time I was looking at my calendar and being like, oh, wait a second, why isn't there work there? So I don't think we can have this conversation without acknowledging that like there's just more jobs for white dudes. We just get more work. Especially those of us who do romance, like the cup runneth over. If we want work, we can take it. But I think the part that I had to learn about that is I was like, oh, I was going on a journey from like doing the type of work I was being offered without trying to trying to get work that I wanted to do in addition to that. And so I had started saying no. And I had started leaving room in my calendar for other projects that could come along. And then I just realized I had overdone it. And it was like, oh, it's time to now reach out to all those people who I said no to and be like, I didn't mean forever. Please send me some work.
But that's so tricky because it's almost, it's like being a gardener or a farmer. It's like you have certain elements that are in your control. You can decide what crops you plant and you can decide how you nurture them, but you can't control the weather. Mm-hmm. And like, that's always going to be a factor. So I just think that there's like some things about like what Kirt's talking about where you're like, okay, hold on, especially in romance land, right? It's like or if you're working with indie folks or sometimes the pubs who do a lot of romance volume will like book you out on a series for a long, long time. And sometimes they're not the best paying jobs and they're not the most enjoyable jobs or the things that we're trying to move our career towards. And suddenly our time is sold. And so if we're trying to sort of cull that crop and make a little space for something else, it takes a lot of trust that things are just going to kind of work out. And sometimes it doesn't. And so that's also just like the nature of what we do is being okay with the flow because, and creating a business that can support the ebb and flow because, I don't know, I'm in the position at the moment where like I'm playing chicken with my schedule a little because I've had way too many projects I've had to say no to that I really wish I could have said yes to. And it's scaring the crap out of me.
Mm.
I've retweet. I'm right there with you where there'll be offers for things or, an audition even where I'm like, should I even audition for this? Like, I don't even know. And I don't know what's going to come my way later. And it's so hard to decide because, and then of course, sometimes I'll also feel a little funky about that because, I'll know that I have certain friends who are like, I would freaking give anything to have more work. And you're like saying no to things, which I know, like, I'm not trying, like, you want to be grateful for what you have and that's the appropriate response. But like, it's a funny feeling. And I want everyone to be settled, paid, happy, and doing great work that they feel really proud of. I just want that for everybody. And sometimes I know that's not what's happening. And it's just a funky emotional spot. And and I've been there. I've been there.
I'll just say very quickly. So what you just said is like, totally a very relatable thing. There's people I love who would love the work. And I don't think it's actually I think you're helping everybody by letting go of the stuff that's not for you. Because if you don't take it, then somebody else can. And maybe that's exactly their cup of tea. And that's exactly what they want. Like we had a conversation, or I was not there, but Deanna, you were on this episode with Hillary Huber and she was saying no more vampire romance ever. And I had to turn to everybody and say no. And Deanna's like, I just want to turn to somebody and say, please give me a vampire romance. So Hillary's no is Deanna's yes, in a way.
Right.
So just want to say
and
that.
Sometimes when I say no to things too, I'll recommend someone who I know has availability or I know would just freaking smash it. And that always feels so good because I'm like, if I can just get my friend some good work and like, it just feels great when you're like, oh, but I know the perfect person for this.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the thing what you were saying about building the business, right? Because whether we're a narrator, an actor, performer, the whole thing is freelance, right? Certain aspects of it are going to be freelance. And it's about building that schedule, sometimes creating the space so you can do something. And yes, there are feelings connected to that, but ultimately, according to what people's individual situations are, it is a business, right? So there's bills that have to be paid. Is it just you? Is it you and a partner? Do you have children? Are you a caretaker of older parents? Like, what is that whole situation? So sometimes it's about making sure the work is right for your mind, for your heart, for your electricity, for your water bill, for your mortgage, for that rent, for that car payment, for that insurance premium. I mean, there's all these different things happening. So sometimes that no has nothing to do with the fact that I don't like the project. That no is maybe I have two choices and I really need to make this monetary choice this month.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm going to do. It's a little bit like doing theater. For me, I basically had to work my way into being able to have the luxury to do some theater because of what the rate of pay was, because it was a passion project. I really wanted to do that role. It was bucket list, but it actually was going to cost me money to do that show because they were not paying a livable wage. Those are the choices we have to make, and then we have to figure out not just how to juggle those things and maintain and grow the relationships with these people who are casting and producing, who are coming to us, so that it doesn't become, it is a no forever because you never say yes to me.
Right.
So I think it's kind of one of those things where we have to give ourselves the opportunity to feel justified in the decisions that we make, no matter what the reason is behind that. Like if I really want to do this story about adoption, but it's not paying anything close to what's going to sustain me, that's my choice to make, you know, where I shouldn't feel pressure to make a different choice. So that's something else I think ultimately, I think it all hits us at different times, right? What's the best time of your year? Is the best time of your year first quarter before you have to pay your taxes? Or is it the end of the year before you decide if you're going to have a Christmas or not? Like it's different for everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to build on one thing you just said, Deanna, which is that like, whatever reason you're making the decision on, like that's yours and you can own it and you can feel good about it. I also just want to say that like, you also don't have to explain yourself when you're saying no, because I think even though that's not really what we're talking about, like it's something that a lot of narrators miss. And like, if they have to say no to something or if they have to ask for an extension or they have to ask for a different deadline, it's like, here's 3 paragraphs about what's going on in my life and why I have to ask for this. And it's like, whatever the reason is, it's fine. Like, just ask for what you need or say no because you know you have a good reason and that's good enough. And like I've never met somebody in this industry who's been like, God, you know, Helen said no to me twice in a row. I wonder what's going on with her. You know, like nobody's doing that.
And if anything, they're probably thinking, I mean, hopefully they're thinking, whoa, she's really in demand.
Yeah.
He's really in demand. They're really in demand. Like, guess people want them. I guess I better get them sooner. Or like, you know, like if there's a project in May and I kind of know about it and, you know, earlier, you know, like to just kind of jump on it and be like, if I really want this narrator, I know they're booked out for a while, so I'd better jump on it instead of, you know, leaving it for later.
Yeah.
Speaking of being booked out for a while though, like how do you avoid the drought when so often books are being like scheduled months, half a year before they're coming out? So like I can email a producer that I know and say like, hey, I have some time next month. Next month might have been booked for them 5 months ago, you know? So like it's this weird game of like Jenga of like, how do I slip certain things into certain places and take other things out? And when do I need to reach out to this producer at this publisher versus when do I need to reach out to this production house because they usually have shorter deadlines? Like, who's even worth reaching out to if I notice I have a gap in my schedule 3 months from now?
Yeah. And I think this is why diversifying is important because there are some companies who are reaching out the week before and they're like, hey, we got this like turnaround. And they have to, I think on one hand, sure, they've got like people they work with, but I think they also have to be aware of like, who do I know is going to just be able to like flip this project or like who recently told me about their availability, right? I also like am thinking about in this context, when you've got projects or when you've got space in your schedule for projects and you're thinking about like how you're going to fill it, for me, that was one of the reasons that I was interested in directing too, is because like the directing emails I get, like the offers for directing I get are like, hey, like, are you available to direct this like 10-hour book like tomorrow or like next week or like, it's the recasts or it's the like someone was out at the last minute. And so all of those things, I think it's about just like people have to know that you're around and available. And additionally, I think that like one other piece when you said, Kirt, about like explaining yourself is on the, maybe it's not a spectrum. Maybe really it's like a grid, you know, like it's a map, it's a forest and there are different parts of the forest. So one other part of the forest is that like, there are people who I want to like invite into my thought process because as producers, I want them to navigate projects the way I'm thinking about them too. So that might be like I tell somebody like, hey, this is my rate that I would love, but if you can put me in a studio, I'll go for this. Right. Or like, I'm having so much trouble with like a home record right now. Like, if you're going to send me something, like I'm going to have to charge this much. Otherwise, like just send me some stuff under a finished hour or whatever it is. That was something that I had with one company, was that like they sent me great stuff. I love working for them. And in fact, their rate is really solid. And I had raised my rate with them. And as soon as I had raised my rate, I didn't process that like I was going to be, the projects in that range were fewer. They were more competitive. And that I wasn't going to be getting as much right as before. Even though we'd had a great relationship, we'd done these projects, they had gone well, I wasn't going to be hearing from them as often. They've been sending me the stuff under a finished hour, but when I'm looking around thinking like, oh my God, where are the projects? It's not there. It took me a lot of retrospection later to be like, I also know that they're not anytime soon going to put me in studio. And it has been to my benefit that they haven't been part of my like hectic process, right? Like they haven't sent me some 10-hour thing that I've had to record at home alone. So that was like, in the moment, it was scary to raise that rate. And then even just a few steps down the road from that, I was like, oh my God, was that the right choice? Do I need to go back and like be like, never mind, like I'll do it, like never mind. And then later on realizing like, actually in my pyramid of things that are benefiting me, this is important. And that's, for some people, I think a question amidst the drought is like, projects aren't coming in. Are my standards too high? Like, have I like shot myself in the foot by saying this or this or this, or I'm trying to aim for these projects, or like I want like, $10 more per finished hour or whatever it is. And often I feel like there are dire moments. There are real, I think, crises like of financial need. Like Deanna said, like your mortgage needs self-care too, right? Like there are real questions that we have to ask around that. And so it's not just a matter of like, oh my God, like I just got this offer. Like, can you believe like 5-digit PFA? Can you imagine a 5-digit PFA? Jesus Christ. But like, I just,
literally cannot.
But to say that like,
how good would those books be though? Just saying.
Oh
are you including the zeros after the dot?
Should I?
Infinite.
Then we've got 5
sense.
digits.
Yeah.
Oh my God. These are, if you've read Narrator by Landon Beach, these are like narrator rates. But that's all just to say that like, that's the real, I think, challenge that some people have, is identifying if the drought means pulling back on standards that you've set for yourself amidst your progress.
See, I think that's an interesting point. I don't necessarily think it's about the standards. I think it's about what have you invested in yourself and in your business as far as your research, as far as your market knowledge. Like, is this a publisher production company offering what they're offering based in a certain part of the country where this is actually a fantastic rate, but you're in Chicago or you're in New York or you're in Los Angeles where, it's not the same. It doesn't equate the same because the cost of living is different. I think if people maybe invest a little bit more time on the front end, really figuring out how people are doing business, how you fit into the business that they're doing, then oh, these people are going to be like the people I always want to work for because they're going to fit, no matter what the project is, they're really going to fit what I need for my lifestyle or where I want to be in my career or the genres of work that I want to work in, that sort of thing. But I think it might be a little bit more about the onus on us as individuals, not the full community, but as individual freelancers in this business, not necessarily taking the time. We're so gung-ho, we're so excited, and we're so passionate. We just jump in, but we have no idea how they're doing things. Like you're talking about our team, our prepper, our proofer, whatever that is, the 1 to 3 to maybe 5 people, right, that work with you for any particular project. What about on their end? You're only talking to one person, maybe two, with the pickup process. But I guarantee there's so many more hands, right? Like involved in that process. And every single one of those people get paid. Nobody is working for free. No one. So I'm telling you, when someone is auditioning for something, they get that email, they audition, they're not thinking of that, especially when they're asked, what is your rate? To me, that's harder. If you give me all the information, I can make a choice. But I have to sit down and actually think about this thing. I have to look at it and go, well, do I think I have to do a lot of research on this? Is this me like just reading it and like really getting into characters? Like, what is this? So yeah, I'm going to say that's on us a little bit more, I think.
I have like I've had to kind of make it like a checklist or like data so that I'm not getting, too in my head or too emotional about everything, because I literally have to look at it, because sometimes I'll get an offer email and I'll go, hooray, an offer. And then I just kind of go off the rails in my brain about like an offer. And then I'm like, oh no, I don't have time. And then I'm like, I go through like 20,000 emotions. So I've had to kind of distill it into a checklist of like, what are the things I would like in a title? And, and if I'm being real picky, so if I'm being real picky, it's like, I would like, I would like to be in a studio. I personally prefer to be in a studio. I work so much quicker, which means I'm making more money because then I have more time later. So I like to be in a studio. Like, just like what you said, like, is this going to be a 24-hour fantasy book with a million pronunciations of a million names that I'm going to have to specifically ask for and get a lot of recordings for? Like, is it going to be really, really hard to research? Is the rate good? Is the rate okay? Is the rate terrible? And just going through all these variables. And, so it really helps me, because if I get an offer and I'm like, okay, so here's, the pros. It's at work. The cons, there's a million, or like the pros, it's an extremely well-to-do, like well-followed author that lots of people know. So, this could be really helpful to my career. But everything else about the job is bad, like the pay is terrible. It's at home. It's a 24-hour book, and like all of these things that just make it, and I have no time, and I'd have to push things around in my schedule. So I have to kind of like weigh the scales on every job. And this is something I learned from someone from my college, and she was talking about theater, film, television, and stuff like that. And it was the same kind of thing where it's like, you have to weigh the variables. Like, how much is my time worth? And just like you were saying too, like, it depends on how busy you are. It depends on how much you need that paycheck. And so that's a thing that kind of messes with my brain, because it's like, okay, when am I letting myself down with my standards, or when am I like acquiescing in a way that I really need to do so that I can get my bills paid, or so that I can, make sure that I'm afloat, and all of these things. So it's like, it's such a complicated thing, but I find that having like a physical checklist, like I've written some of this stuff out, and being able to just be like, okay, you've been offered a job. Let's look. What boxes does it tick? Is it enough to feel justified? Is it enough to feel worth it? And also, how we doing? Like, do we need this job? Like, how we vibing?
That X factor of what could this do for my career is always such a mind fuck.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it is what you're talking about, Helen, which is like, okay, really popular author or big publisher, like book that's getting probably a marketing budget behind it. Like, okay, that's very exciting and very good. Exposure's great. Other times it's like, will this help me get in with this person who can give me more work?
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's not necessarily a thing I love, or it's not quite the rate I want yet, but maybe there's room to negotiate later. But like, if I show, especially in those cases where they're like reaching out and they're like, hey, we really need this by like next month. Any chance? And it's like,
right.
You want to do them a solid because you want to be in their mind as somebody who came through for them, so that you can get more work down the line. And so sometimes we take those projects just because it's like, yeah, I think this will be good for me in the long run. There's no way to know for sure. You just kind of have to go with your gut and hope that you're right. And you'll be wrong half the time.
I got an audition for a job, and it was like the rushiest rush job I'd ever done. It was truly like no time. And I was kind of stressed, but I was like, oh, I've wanted to get in with this. I've wanted to get in with them for so long. Like, let's just do it. And I did it. And it was just a nightmare. Like everything that could go wrong did, but I got it to them. They didn't know any of this. It was just me like sweating and crying and, having a terrible time. And then, and I sent it in and I was like, yes, now they know that I'm super dependable Helen and they're going to give me so much gosh darn work. Well, I didn't get another audition from them for a year and a half. And I'm glad I did a year and a half later, but I was like, oh, it might have been for nothing. Like, darn it.
Was it the same experience the second time it came around? Was it last minute and you were like, oh gosh, I got to jump right into this and do all this work and drive myself nuts? Or was it different?
It was not as last minute, but it was still like fairly last minute. Like it was, it was like a couple of weeks, like it was not, yeah. So yeah, and and hey, I didn't get that one. So I was just like, okay, well, now I was like, okay. Like, but but then of course I was like, I didn't get it. Like,
yeah,
what
it's
a
roller coaster we're on, eh?
It's a freaking roller coaster.
Because that's so real. Because if the question is, like, oh, I want to get in with these folks, but like the rate isn't where I want it to be. Are you going to do the project to get in with them just to continue to get a rate that you're going to be unsatisfied with in the future, or turnaround times that you're going to be unsatisfied with, or a lack of like different other resources that you're going to be unsatisfied with? And I have a friend, and if they ever listen to this, they know exactly who they are. And for them, audiobooks are something they do like to the side of the majority of their work. It's not like what pays the bills. They do it because they love them. And they'll get like the 10-hour dry literary fiction from this company that they haven't worked with yet, but they want to in with. And I'm like, you are going to hate every minute of that. And you're going to do that just so they can like maybe send you a rom-com in a couple months. Like, just be specific. If for the people who can identify what they want and what's going to bring them joy, like you can be specific. Like you can reply, and this person did ultimately, right? For other people, like got the dry nonfiction they didn't want to do and is like, hey, nonfiction doesn't make me super happy. Here's what I would love to do. Can you reach out when you have something like that? And the producer was like, yeah, absolutely. And they just celebrated that they finally got that offer that they're like really excited about, right? And so I think that's where that ongoing assessment is about this drought is what are you building, right? What is the experience that you're building? There are moments where it is a challenge through and through, and the bills have to be paid. And there are other moments where you can navigate, where you can construct something that you're really excited about, and you have to assess, like, do I want to be known as the person who's going to do 25 accents in this historical nonfiction if secretly all I want to do is horror, right? Like, I think we have to like really highlight the significance of that, especially when there's room for us to play, when there's something for safety. And that's why I'm such a big advocate of like saying what you want, because I think it's there, especially as we get 12 straight years of double-digit growth. I think there's going to be more of those things that we want.
And like you said, André, like saying what works for you, because your, 15 accents in a book might be somebody else's. I have to research all these, technical chemistry words, might be somebody else's. I have to record this from home, might be, it's like we all have different value on what those asks are on us. And so that's where it becomes a little more complex than just a simple math equation, like Helen was talking about. It's like there's lots of factors to consider.
And then we move to the wave. Dun, dun, dun. The booked and busy era. The stress, the unmanageable. A couple weeks ago, this was my formula. I had a 15-hour book, and we were in studio from 10 to 4, Monday through essentially actually Saturday. We also recorded on Saturday because we were just going to go straight through. The week before, Wednesday to Friday, I was supposed to have just had a nice little slot in of something. And that Thursday, I got a cold. So we shifted that second recording day to the Wednesday the following week. And that recording project then became a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday project. Simultaneously, I was behind on something else, something that was a home record and something that had just been like impossible to get to, and was recording that in the mornings before I was going into the studio. And in the middle of all of this, I got an ear infection so bad that I lost my hearing for 4 days. Took a day off and then kept recording. Every single project in this whole circus was gorgeous, beautiful. I loved it all. But at the same time, like, I know that it wouldn't have been the same problem if all of those projects, several of them did, thankfully, but if all of those projects, if I had really thought ahead and hit the marks that I needed to hit with them in terms of studio availability, in terms of a director, in terms of what pieces needed to be there in order for things to be more flexible in the case of like something like that. And those moments are great and fun in a lot of different ways, especially when there isn't an ear infection involved. But I'm curious for y'all. You feel like you're on top of the world. You're recording every day. And maybe you're also wondering if audiobooks are eating away time for your personal life, if they are eating away your self-care practices. Like what is the wave for y'all?
Well, I can go ahead and jump on this because André, you know I had a crazy month last month, and it was rough, man. And I pretty much made a vow to me and to my fiance that I will never do that again. It was just it was too much, and I kept taking projects, and then it was, you know, the kind of thing where there was one project where I thought it was 5 hours, but it turns out it was 10, and, you know, things like that, like, you know, just like little miscommunications and things like that. And all of a sudden I was just truly staring up at this like tsunami of a month. And I was like, oh, I have really shit the bed on this one. I'm really screwed. And it was awful. Like, it was really awful because I had no time for myself. My voice was genuinely hurting and tired, and I didn't want to let anyone down. And I felt this immense pressure. And I basically, like, I've, you know, had a conversation with myself, and I also had a conversation with my partner. And I just was like, hey, you know, this can't happen again. I'm not going to let it happen again. And we are going to honor the sacred lazy Sunday or self-care Sunday, depending on how you feel about it. And I'm slowly trying to make it into lazy weekend. And I'm just like, okay. So I set a schedule for myself, and I was like, I'm going to do 9 to 5, baby. Like Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Outside of that, no. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, well, I could just do some admin work on a Saturday. That's not really working, is it? But it is. And you have to stop, is me to myself, by the way. Because, like, you know, like, I'm always thinking, you know, because we work from freaking home. So we're like, well, I could just get some stuff done, and wouldn't that feel good? And you know, and I'm an addict. Like, I have to stop. I have to stop myself, because I really, you know, something I'm proud of about myself is that I really am proactive and pragmatic, and I'm like, let's get stuff done so I don't have to think about it anymore. But I also, like, I've been really working hard to learn that it's really important to take care of myself and to do other creative things, not to just let narrating and acting be just at the forefront of my mind at all times, because it will drive me nuts. Like, I know that for me as a person, like I was someone who did not want to go to a conservatory for college. I wanted to get a double major in acting and literature. So here we are. Hello. You know, but I wanted to do other things. I wanted to write. I wanted to sew my own clothing. I wanted to draw and paint and do illustrations. Like, I had so many other interests. And so now I'm realizing in my adult life, as like someone in the workforce, I'm realizing how incredibly important it is to have those restful times where I'm playing a video game, or I'm painting a picture, or I'm talking to a friend on the phone, and I'm not thinking about work at all. I am demonetized on you know, anything besides 9 to 5. I am demonetized, and I'm chilling, and it has made the work much more fulfilling, and it's made me much more ready to work, instead of like getting into the booth and slamming the door and just being like, all right, let's do this freaking book. Like, you know, like now I get in the booth and I'm like, all right, let's get zen. Let's get this little book done. It's going to be great. You know, and I just feel much, much better. So I cannot sing the praises enough of having a like somewhat regular schedule and holding yourself to it and being like strict with yourself. I really only break it if it's like, oh my God, a lot went wrong and I have a deadline. It is due tomorrow. I have to do it. But I don't let myself get there usually.
You know, that sense of feeling like you don't have the joy when you step in to do the work anymore, like that's a textbook sign of burnout. And that's that, you know, when you feel that, it's a little too late, you know, to actually make any moves on that this time around. But I just do want to shout out like two amazing business coaches in our industry who've really helped me to think about this balancing act. Andy Arndt and Jennifer Gillaraya have really great plans for how to manage that really important structure we all need to implement as gig workers, as passionate artists who love what we do. So of course we want to act more and read more. And, you know, it's like there's everything. And we've also been socially conditioned to be like, take the job, you're never going to get work again, right? So like there's so much signaling that we need to keep saying yes. So creating that structure and that safety around our lives and our schedules and our work, because the work, you know, pays the cost of that burnout, the quality of the work, is really essential. And one thing I think Andy pointed out first to me is if you make your calendar for as much of the year as you can ahead of time, blocking out your personal time first, then you really have to have a conversation with yourself before you sell that time, because you've already blocked that time out. And another great strategy is like having a week of space that is movable. So when the right thing comes along out of the blue, you already have that space. And if you're, you know, you decide your comfort zone, but you're like in a place where you're starting to feel like I would like to fill that week, then you can do it. And that's your choice because you're your boss. But I think having those conversations with yourself, and I think I've heard both those women speak to this, but those conversations with yourself as a boss being like, hey, are you being a good boss to me? Are you treating me well? Do I want to keep working for you? Like, are these working conditions viable? If not, we need to set some new ground rules, some new boundaries. And like in my crazy head, I go as far as like, I have different colored clown noses I put on when I play different parts in my business so that I know who I am, because I am wearing all these different hats or noses or whatever it is. And it's helpful to sometimes step away and separate that, because there's nobody I'm better at convincing to do something that I don't want to than myself.
That discipline to give yourself time off is the hardest lesson to learn. And sticking to it, because it's so easy to think that is sacrificial time. But like Helen said, like, I think so many creative people need to, like, if we just did one creative thing all the time, it would start to suck and we would hate it. Like, we have to do other things. Like, we refill our cup as narrators by getting the fuck out of our booth and going and doing something else. You know?
Yes.
This is another way that I fill my cup, is just talking to other people who know what this life is. You know, that's also really important. Creating relationships, having friendships. And that is something that, like, you have to factor into your schedule as well. Like, when am I going to go be with people who know what this is? And then the other thing is, I'm going to say it just for the people who maybe were like me, and it sounds so silly in hindsight that I didn't think about this, but like, when scheduling, schedule some buffer time in case you get a cold on every project. I mean, for me, it's not usually much, but it's like, okay, if that's going to take me 4 days to record, I'll schedule it for 5. Also, if you think it's going to take you a long time to prep a book, schedule the prep. Don't think that prep is something that happens just when you're not recording. Like, oh, I'll record all day and then I'll go prep a book. That's not healthy or helpful either. Like, schedule every part of the process and make sure that you have time to do those things. So if you know that you have to get questions into a producer by X date, give yourself a prep day on your calendar before that date, so that you can do that work and it's not something that's catching up to you at 9:00 at night when you're like, well, I guess I have to stay up late now and do this. Because we do also, like, it sounds like a lot of us have partners, and like, we owe them parts of ourselves as well. We can't just be like, I'm sorry, I'm working, goodbye. You know, like, we got to go home and have dinner. We got to take the dogs for a walk. Like, these are things that we owe to the people in our lives who love and support us.
And like Helen said about Lazy Sunday too, like you also gotta schedule the management stuff, the outreaches, that have a day for it. I think maybe last year at APAC, Sophie Amos told me, that at the time she doesn't record Wednesdays. That's her like admin day. And that time has to happen somewhere, because if it's not happening then, it's happening into the evening. It's happening around breakfast or dinner. It's happening over the weekend. So all of that is like real time that has to like be visualized when you plan it out. And I think some of the best, like one thing I think about constantly too, is that for the folks who are booked and busy all the time, the wave feels like it lasts the whole year. You feel like you're drawn away from time with family or other things are happening. One great way to free up a little bit of your time is to raise your rates and disincentivize that many projects without significantly chipping away from the amount of money that you're making. And that's
Andy
part
Arndt
of what
in
I
the
mean.
room. I hear Andy Arndt in the room.
The ghost of her.
Yeah.
But truly, like, you have to be able to, I think, like, see all of these things in context.
Yeah.
And I'll make the official transition to dun dun dun. Since we've moved from the wave into, with a drought, you need a great farm. With a wave, you need a great ship. And so I think all of these things are our ships and our farms, our checklists, our considerations for timing, the solid treatment of, you schedule time for yourself, you schedule time for family, you schedule personal time, and you treat it the same way as if you had scheduled something in the studio, right? That thing is ironclad in there. And I feel like that has been something that I have like struggled with a lot, particularly when it comes to, I think, like thinking about those invisible transitions, right? Like for me, there was a period a few months back where like I was going into the studio, every day of the week, and I was getting my admin things done, and it felt good, but I'd get home at the end of the day and it was functionally a 9 to 5 at that point. And I'm tired at the end of the day. I wasn't doing a ton of like socializing. I wasn't creating space for other things. And so it's this whole balance. Like you have to refill the cup. Like not doing is not the same as rejuvenating, is not the same as like making something sustainable. Right. I learned the hard way that instead of having a 10 to 4 recording schedule, I had a 10 to 5 one time. And that hour over the course of, it was 6 days. We were doing an 18-hour book. That 1 hour was enough time to start hurting my voice after a couple days. And so just knowing that, and like you said, Kirt, like asking for more time, not just in case you get the cold, not just in case it takes you longer. Like sometimes my recording ratio is all over the place, depending on if there's a ton of stuff to change in the moment or a ton of voices, accents, whatever. But also just for the fact that like, I want my voice to work on the next book. Like I want to be able to do this career for a long time. And if I'm walking away from every book dull, I'm not going to be able to.
Yeah. And that being said, like on the flip side of setting boundaries to have your own time away from the booth, sometimes when we're going through those moments, it's like super important to set boundaries from the outside world asking a lot of you. Like I know I struggle sometimes with, okay, I've got, a 17-hour book with 10 to 5 sessions for 7 days straight. And that's an exception in my calendar. And so for that week, I'm not going to go out whenever anybody asks me. I'm not going to go to the networking event and scream my guts off. I'm not going to go to the concert. I'm I'm just going to be okay, like going to bed when I get home. Like that's going to be enough. But I really have a hard time with that. So for anybody else, I just offer like, it's okay also to be like, I got a busy week. I need to treat my instrument right. Like, no.
A long time ago, I had to just embrace the fact that I grew up in the theater. And instead of trying to fight what that learned internal schedule was and try to do 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, because that's not a theater schedule, I just leaned into, if I did not have to do it, if it was not required of me, my schedule is very unconventional. My weekends are always during the week. They're not Saturday, Sunday. I can always get stuff done. If I have to physically go to the bank, if I need an appointment for something, I can always get it because it's during the week as opposed to trying to do it on the
and there aren't a million
weekend.
people trying to do. I like, oh my gosh, when I worked in
Trying to
restaurants and
do the
having like
same
a
thing.
midweek weekend is like the best because
Or
you're
the
not dealing with it.
beach,
Yeah,
like the stuff we do all the time. So the other thing, because I started as a singer, and if I was working, if I had a gig, I did not talk excessively. I just didn't do it. I didn't go places where I knew people were going to be smoking because I'm susceptible to all that. So I created those boundaries for myself, and I had the discipline to go home and be quiet and things like that. In doing this narration, I think some people forget most of the time you're doing a one-person show. That's way more than you would ever do in your standard play or musical when you literally are on stage for, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes where you're actually talking or singing. And so we work way more usually than we would for a theater production. So sometimes we just need to shut it all down and literally just be quiet, text people, send them memes, stop doing the Zooms, like literally just stop talking. I'm not saying I do it all the time. I'm not saying that I'm like, okay, fine, but I'm getting a lot better at surrounding myself with people who get it, who are disappointed in the moment, but they're like, yeah, I get it. I totally get it. And they meet me where I'm at. I think it's okay for us to give ourselves those boundaries, to allow ourselves to be disciplined, to throw everything to the side and just have a lazy Sunday. Like, this is work, and it's a business sometimes where we don't have team support. We're literally doing all the other things by ourselves. Don't even talk about like the technical part of the booth. What? We're not just performing, guys. We're doing other things.
But that's why moving in these spaces and like talking to other people who know what this work is so important. Because just hearing you say that helps me so much because I don't live around people who get that. If I was going to them and be like, oh my God, I had 6 full hours in the booth today and I am just so drained and I feel like dead, they'd be like, you worked for 6 hours and you feel bad?
Yes.
Like, because they don't understand what the work entails. And like, will you go sit in a box and talk out loud and emote and connect to a text for 6 hours straight and then tell me you don't feel kind of shitty?
And then also send the emails and maybe do an hour of prep and like make sure you did your warm up and make sure you did your cool down.
And oh, by the way, do it again and again and again for a full week. Like,
yeah.
All of this, I think, ties into what often feels like the final conversation, like what is the rate that I'm going to charge? But I think this conversation reveals, right, is maybe half the conversation, sometimes less, right? Like even in Kirt's scenario, like I've done a lot of math about how many finished hours can I do a day and still meet my income goal for the end of the year, right? And that's not just about like, how your point of exhaustion too. Like maybe you are like a stay-at-home parent as an audiobook narrator and you only have that time after drop off and before pickup. And so you are framing your year based on that. And so of course you've got to have clients who are going to be able to meet a rate that will actually stack up to where it needs to be. Right. And I'll say some stuff about like thoughts I've had, and I'd love to hear from y'all too, how kind of all this conversation ties into it. I feel like for me, a lot of it first felt like, oh, I've done this number of books and I like got this nomination or I got this one award. And so like now that has to like one be a metric up to my rate increase or whatever. And then there was a point at which I was like, in 10 years, those are Scott Brick rates, right? Like that's not necessarily like the trajectory that everyone is going to have. It's not like a clean slope that's going to end with, the 5-digit PFH that I mentioned earlier. But right now where it feels like I am is that I want to prop up relationships with clients that feel what's the phrase? Like, set and play. Like, I think for me right now, there are 3 clients where when they send me like an audition or an offer, I already know they're going to put me in studio. I already know they're going to meet my rate. I just have to look at the project, and if the book feels like a fit, and if it's going to bring me joy, and if there's some twist I can bring to it. And that's been through conversations. It's been through like setting my rate. It's been through like looking up their SAG-AFTRA contract and understanding the range, right? Because for me, it felt like you learn a range, and so the framework that I'm talking about when I say range is that, like, let's say I run a production company and my like lowest budget projects have like a range of a PFH, and there's the bottom and the top of that range. Like, my goal isn't always necessarily to like immediately just get to the top of that range and like just get as much money out of that project as possible. My goal is also to say, like, cool, so where did the offer start when it came to me? What did SAG-AFTRA say was their minimum? How do I want to like grow with this company in that range over time? Because if I hit that top of that range right now, and that's the same range they're going to have for the next 10 years, I don't have a raise for 10 years now, right? There's no room for me to grow. And it impacts other things. If I'm getting at the top of that range, that's, maybe money that could have been a director. Maybe they had extra room in the budget for a director or an engineer or studio time or whatever it was. But I'm curious how y'all have thought about this.
I will say, I think we have different brains, André, because I think you think about this so much more than I do. I also have the luxury, Deanna kind of brought this up earlier, of like, I don't live in one of the major metropolises. My cost of living is lower than everyone else in this chat. So I got to be a little bit more relaxed about how I raised my rates because, that was okay for me. Those rates were good. I was hitting my goals with where I was at. And so for me, and it was through working with Andy Arndt, it was like finally reaching a point where it was like, I need to think about rates as my value more than like what I need to get by. And so that is when I started asking for raises and raising things, especially with indie clients and the production houses that I work with all the time, being like, I'm not asking for anything crazy, but if we could go here, that'd be fantastic. And to date, they've all been perfectly lovely about it.
I was basically interventioned. My friend Mia, who Gail basically introduced me to, we were talking about rates, and we talked super transparently about money and rates and all that, just so that we can, kind of keep track of what's going on in the industry and with each other. And she was just like, she was nicer than this, but she was basically like, girl, what? No, you need to charge more. Are you joking? And I was like, no. And she was like, oh my God, no. You like she was like, okay, respectfully, I'm not trying to cross the line or anything, but like, you are worth more than that. Like, and I just didn't know because, not everyone talks about it. It's not always super, comfortable for people necessarily. And I just was kind of chugging along, charging what I charge, and for years, and I just never changed it. And it really took talking to a friend, like super openly about finances and money to realize, oh my God. And what do you know? Like, when I started to negotiate, and like, André, you were there with me when I was like, okay, I'm going to start trying to negotiate. And you were a huge reason why I do it. So thank you. Like, almost no one said no. Like, everyone was like, okay. And I was like, and we're talking like not just like, oh, could it be $10 more? Like sometimes like $75 more per finished hour, like sometimes huge shifts in like what the rate was versus what I actually worked for. And they were like, yeah, sure. And I could not comprehend how that was possible. And I was like, oh my God, this has opened a whole world up to me. And I'm so thankful for, for people in my life who are like, actually, I think you're kind of lowballing yourself right now. Like, you can charge more, and you should.
And I just have to highlight this really quickly because it came up a little bit in what Kirt said too, which is that like some people do not know that you can negotiate with publishers. It is completely acceptable. My favorite phrase is like, can you check if it's in the if there's room in the budget, right? And that like every project is so different, which is why I'm really grateful that we framed this episode the way we did. Because like you said, Helen, sometimes there is room for that like 75% bump. I got an audition once that was like well below the rate I wanted from that client, and was like, hey, like I imagine it's not in the budget for this one, but in the future, can you come back to me for stuff at this range? And they're like, oh, we have that in this project. It was like 50% over what the rate they had sent me was, and they had it. Some projects, like to the dollar, cannot go a dollar higher. They are where they're at, right? So it's worth having the conversation and knowing that like other people are having the conversation, and again, bringing in all these things that we're talking about.
And
Deanna.
if you ask it, if you open the floor in a way that allows it to be a conversation instead of a, you know, either or, this is, you know, this is it. This is my hard boundary here around money. Like I've found that folks are looking out for you as well. And they'll let you know, like they're going to be honest with you if you're being honest with them. And I've had multiple people who have that power to at least turn back to somebody and ask for more money, if not give it themselves. Say like, why aren't you asking for more? Or if you don't ask, I can't get it for you. So we might as well ask. So I think that like, you're not going to burn bridges by asking for more money in the right way.
I do want to add to that though, just be prepared, right? Because there's different sides to things. Oh, yeah. Like I know to this day, there's probably one client I would probably never work for because I was just told no. And I was literally told like, we just don't operate like that. And that will probably never be a thing. So it might just depend on the project. It may actually depend on their business model and what they're able to do and what actually works for you. Don't mesh together. And you kind of just have to be prepared for that. I think there's, you know, the yeses that will come, but just know that there's some no's.
Yeah.
And be ready.
And it's okay to let that go. Like you're right.
Exactly.
Like you're saying, have that meeting with yourself before you walk into that negotiation and be like, hey, if we get a no, like, are we done? Are we done with this? Can we leave it?
Yeah.
And maybe have some space for something better to come along.
Because it's amazing what can happen when you leave that space.
Right? The space will
It's scary.
The space will fill. It may not fill with what you expect. It may not fill with what you've designed, but something will come along. Yeah. And it is scary. Yeah.
Yeah.
André, like you asking that question too about how we think about that stuff, like sometimes I think my little sort of CEO meetings with myself, I'll sort of evaluate like, am I feeling financially fulfilled? Am I feeling creatively fulfilled? Am I feeling like personally fulfilled? And if the answer to that question is no, then I want to like dive deeper and figure out why. And then that's where the asks come from for me. So like maybe it's with this client, they really fulfill me financially, but they don't give me the content I want. It doesn't make me feel good working on the projects they give me. So like, do they have the projects that I want? And then can I ask them for those things a bit more? Or maybe this person doesn't respect my boundaries around time and they send me pickup packets at 4:50 on a Friday and they want it back before Monday. Like, you know, do I like that working relationship? Are the books they send me worth it? Is the money they pay me worth it to like be on call all the time? And sometimes I'll be like, you know what? This person, they give me great work. They pay me really well, but it feels like such a slog. Like what can I ask from them that can make my life a little bit easier or more enjoyable? Do they have a prep budget for this? Can they put me in the studio? Can I get a director on this project? Because not all projects are created equal, even from the same publishing house or the same casting director. And I think also if we're working with indie clients, it's important to be clear about that stuff as well, because potentially the indie client doesn't understand all those things that we're doing behind the surface beyond just narrating the book. So, you know, I think like Helen was saying earlier, having that sort of spreadsheet or matrix of evaluation and then being like, in what directions am I not feeling fulfilled and how can I push that a little bit is like the process I ideally try to go on as often as possible.
Another piece I'm thinking about too is like, and I wish I had remembered there was a SAG-AFTRA meeting about the audiobook SAG-AFTRA meeting, and there was a really informative tidbit that I didn't know about production companies versus publishers and how the financial landscape is different for production companies. that they have their own contracts with the union in a way that publishers don't. And so for them, like, this conversation looks different. The budget on books looks different. And so I think that's why having the conversation is important, because, you know, I've gotten a couple like brusque responses sometimes when I try to ask about like rates, but it feels relevant to understand how that company operates. I am not going to know if I don't ask.
That's
I'm
right.
just not, right?
That's right.
And like for a publisher, the people, when they print the book and they also make the audiobook at the same time, you've got your Big Five, Scholastic, whatever it is, like for them, often the way that they're structured is that they estimate early on how many sales a book is going to make. And that's what impacts their budget on the back end of the book, right? There's even like, they're like, oh, it's going to sell under 500 copies. Here's the budget that it's going to get. We think it's going to sell over 3,500 copies. Here's the budget it's going to get. And in those conditions, like the union has even said like, oh, if you think it's going to sell that much, you have to offer a higher minimum. Like all those details are in contracts, right? And so I think that's valuable to know. But the audio publishers, the people who buy audio rights, don't sell the print book and just make the audiobook, or even the production companies have different contracts, different relationships to the budgets, different abilities to put you in studio or not, different options about giving you directors, different pieces like that. And so I feel like, one, we have to ask as we're getting auditions, as we're getting these projects, but two, we, like Kirt said, we have to talk to other narrators. We have to like understand, like, you know, I just got this offer and it looks funny because I worked for so-and-so and they did it like this. Like, does this company do it the same way? Right. And I think we can't navigate properly as like small businesses without knowing that full breadth of information. I feel so much better about like not like skyrocketing rates or hearing about like, you know, what J-Lo got paid to narrate an audiobook. I don't know that J-Lo's ever narrated an audiobook, but like what like a celebrity rate or like an author read rate is, and being like, oh my God, like, well, I feel so much clearer and grounded myself with the information that I have because I, as a union member, asked the union, or because I, as an audiobook narrator, talk to other audiobook narrators. I feel like we can't underestimate the power of being informed.
Yeah.
I mean, knowledge is power. And I mean, I just want to say it out so it's not glossed over. As a SAG-AFTRA member, we have a team that is dedicated to helping us understand what that information is. So that's not anything you have to think of like, I can't do that. Like, we should. Every single time we get an audition, we should be going, hey, what's happening right now with these people? So you know when you go, you know, into the situation. Because when you're auditioning, in my opinion, when you're auditioning is the best time to talk about that. Not when you've been given the book with the understanding that maybe it's a little bit different than what you want or what you're anticipating. Like, that's actually not great from a casting standpoint.
So I feel like when it comes to negotiations, I've had very different experiences with people, because like what I like to do is like, if I'm offered an audition, I like to know all the information. Like, I want to know what the rate is. I want to know what the time frame will be. Sometimes you don't get that. Like, sometimes they'll just email it and they're like, here you go. And what I like to do is I like to just do my due diligence and just be like, hey, I don't want anyone to waste anyone's time. So I just want to check in about what the schedule is going to be, what the rate for this project is, all that stuff. And occasionally, sometimes I've received a reply that's like, we can discuss it if you get chosen. And I'm like, okay, but when, you know, I'm not trying to sass master or anything here, but I'm just like, okay, but like, you know, if I record the audition and I put a lot of effort into it and then I send it to you and then you review it and then you send it to the author to review and then they pick it and then they send it back to you and then I'm chosen and then it turns out I'm not available or the rate is like extremely low or any of the other factors we've talked about already, well, then we've like kind of wasted a bunch of time. But at the same time, there is a little bit of that feeling of like, oh, if I'm chosen, oh yes, of course. I can't ask. I'm not allowed. You know, it's this weird feeling. And so, but I understand why in their, you know, in their mind in that moment, they're like, well, we're not really there yet. we haven't reached that point yet, so it's not really relevant yet. But I'm like, it's gonna be like it
but
could
it's relevant to me.
It's relevant to me. So I always ask that, and I was just wondering if anyone else has had a similar experience and how you navigate it.
Well, the thing is, like, there are some folks who bind you to the rate that you discuss when the audition happens. And so I think that, like, I don't know that you should change anything. You know what I mean? Like, I get a book coming in and I know that there's going to be like a tight scheduling window. I'm going to mention that right away. Yeah. Or like, oh, can you see if you can, is there room in the budget for studio or whatever it is? Like, I'm going to mention that right away, right? Because it's going to impact when the offer comes in, whether or not you can actually do it. So absolutely. I don't know that I would change anything.
And even if their answer is like, we can't get to that yet, at least you've put it on the table that that's something you're going to ask for. So they can be aware of that and have that expectation built in. I think that kind of folds in also to like, we don't, maybe some folks do. I don't, and I don't hear a lot about like people booking out with casting folks because we don't really work with agencies, right? So like often you have many auditions out there hoping maybe one of them lands and possibly several of them land at the same time and they're asking for the same amount of space. And there are certain folks who are like, can you hold these 15 days? We might record for 3 of them. And then there are people who are like, we can schedule it anytime you want in the next 6 months. And so like everybody's working very differently around how time works. And so you clearly articulating what you have to offer or where your questions are, or like, hey, somebody's asking for my time. Like, do you still want it? Like, I think that is on us. So I think that's the right move. Yeah.
Well, and then I've got a follow-up question, which is if someone does reply, like, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, like my instinct, my wishful instinct is to be like, well, if I don't know all the information, I can't really in good faith audition for this. But I also don't want to seem like a chotch, like I want to like.
But in what other industry of acting would they do that to you?
I have been held for a TV show for 3 months. And then they never told me that I was released. And I just had those 3 months. And I was like, well.
Yeah.
So let me rephrase. In this acting profession, you don't pay us enough for us to just hang out waiting for you to give us work. You need to tell us.
Well, we can't. We really can't. I mean, and use this work to actually live on the earnings. Like we need to we need to generate basically our own finances. And so, I think it's different if it's something, out in the ether where you've got time to let it, be or not be. But, if you're coming down to whether, that month something's not going to get paid, I mean, you can't. You got to take the gig that's going to sustain you. And I think they know that. I don't think they would hold it against you.
This has been such a juicy conversation. And as an act of love to our editor, we're now going to bring it to a close. Thank you so much, Helen, for joining us at the round table. It's been a joy. We know the droughts. We know the waves. We know the ships and we know the farms. We got the resources. We know that we're going to be empowered when we talk to other narrators. Being informed is being elevated. And so I'm really excited to just see what people make of their futures and their careers in the audiobook world. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a delight, and I've been looking forward to it. And man, above and beyond all expectations. It was awesome.
Thank you for joining us at the Narrator Roundtable. If you want to join the conversation, find us on social media or visit our website, narratorroundtable.com, to submit a question or a topic of discussion for a future episode. What's on your mind? We want to talk about it.
The Narrator Roundtable is produced and hosted by André Santana, Deanna Anthony, Gail Shalan, Kirt Graves, and Lindsey Dorcus. All copywritten material is shared with permission. Music and sound effects are licensed through Storyblocks Audio. All opinions shared are those of the individuals and do not reflect the positions or policies of any company or organization with which they happen to be associated.